Hi everyone. So I recently got the Softube Console 1 Mark III. I bought it secondhand just to try it out, see if it works for my own mixing workflow. And so far I'm loving it. I'm very surprised with how intuitive it feels. By far the best feature is the Vegas mode. It makes the studio look good. Even better than that, you can play ping pong. I think it's called ping pong. Pong? Anyway, you can 1v1 your clients using this device, which is pretty cool. But as I was playing around, I discovered that I have a big issue with the way that they've implemented FabFilter's Pro L2 plugin. To begin, let's talk about what you would use a limiter for. First, you would probably want to set the output level, which is the ceiling you want your levels to be peaking at. Usually that's something that you know where you want to set it up to begin with. For example, if you want to do an Apple Digital Master, your track needs to be at -1 dB true peak. So you set that up, and then the next thing you want to do is increase the gain into the limiter until you've reached your track's desired level and desired amount of limiting. The way FabFilter's Pro L2 plugin works is pretty intuitive with this workflow. You set up the output ceiling that you want, and then you increase the gain amount until you've reached the desired loudness and limiting, just like you would want to use a limiter. Okay, let's see how this plugin is mapped in Console 1 then. The first thing we want to do is set the output ceiling level. On the console, what we do have is a compression knob. If we start turning it, we see that it's called the gain knob. Let's turn it up. Okay, so for some reason it turns up the gain and also starts limiting, but for some reason it peaks above 0 dB. So obviously something's off here. If we hold shift and turn the same knob, we can see that the makeup gain was in auto mode. To try and figure out what's going on in the plugin, let's just set it to 0 dB. So there's no makeup gain. Okay then, let's go back and turn up the compression encoder again, the so-called gain parameter in Console 1, and see what happens. It looks like nothing is happening until it starts limiting, and then the signal starts getting quieter. So it looks like in Console 1's version of the plugin, we don't have an output parameter where we set up our desired ceiling level, and instead we have a movable threshold, which for some reason is called gain, but it isn't the equivalent to the original plugin's gain parameter. It is something different. Okay. Pretty weird choice, but once we take into account the way that the other compressors are mapped to Console 1, it's obvious that this decision was made so that the same knob functions similarly across all plugins for muscle memory. Okay, so let's work with it and turn the gain up at +1 dB and assume that we set the ceiling to -1 dB. I do want to point out, however, that even in Pro C2, if I turn the same knob on Console 1, the display correctly shows that you're turning the threshold down, and so the values go from 0 to negative numbers. So I cannot understand why in Pro L2 it is arbitrarily reversed. Anyway, thinking back on how we want to use limiters, what we would then want to do is increase the equivalent of gain in the original Pro L2 plugin so that we push our signal into the limiter and reach the level that we want. To our horror, we push the signal, and not only does it surpass the -1 dB point without triggering the limiter, we can push indefinitely, digitally clip our DAW, and Pro L2 never starts limiting. Oh no, the makeup gain also increases the ceiling level. Okay, so that means that if we want to limit our track with an output ceiling of -1 dB true peak, we have to 1. Hope that the plugin is defaulted to true peak because we don't have the option to change that parameter ourselves. 2. Use the gain knob, which is actually a movable threshold parameter, which doesn't exist in the original plugin, and turn it up even though we want it to go down until it starts limiting, at which point we 3. Use the makeup gain to bring everything back up again. 4. Look at our track's peak levels in our DAW to figure out where the levels are at, because the numbers Console 1 is showing us are not only reverse, but also now meaningless because they have been since moved by the makeup gain, and 5, painstakingly adjust the makeup gain until we stumble at the peak level we were initially aiming for. Okay, it could have been so much easier. The so-called gain knob, the compression encoder on the hardware, could have been the output level, which would go in the negative direction. You set the output ceiling that you want, and then you move on. The makeup gain could have just been the gain, which you would use to push your signal into the limiter until you've reached your desired level of limiting and level. If we open Pro C2, those same controls function in the exact same way. And that sort of makes sense for compressors, because you sort of want to turn one knob until you start hearing compression, and then raise the entire thing back up again. In a compressor, you would never want or expect the makeup gain to push into the compressor harder. You expect to push the processed compressed signal up. In a limiter, you expect the gain to be earlier in the signal chain, which is why in Pro they call it gain, not makeup gain. The fix could be simple. Instead of having a makeup gain knob, just map the gain parameter of the plugin into that encoder. Hold shift and push the track into the limiter. Simple. That way you can be precise with your output level, the ceiling control, called the gain here for some reason, and set it at the peak value that you want. That is how an end user wants to use a limiter, and that's how it would make sense to be mapped on console 1. It could also be that I'm missing the point somehow, and this workflow makes sense for some reason that I'm being blind to right now. I haven't seen anyone complain online about this, and so I want to hear your thoughts. If you've used Pro L2 with console 1, how do you feel about it? Did it feel intuitive to you? Or did you just end up inserting Pro L2 as a separate plugin at the end of the chain and call it a day? Because that's just infinitely faster. Let me know your thoughts, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.